hold space for your darkness, a first responder mental health podcast hosted by me, Erin Jane, where we have conversations about what it's like to perform a first responder role and the mental health challenges that can accompany it. That would be a bit of meatloaf there with I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. G'day guys, you are here holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station on our standard Tuesday afternoon date. G'day guys. We are holding space this week because it is Suicide Prevention Month. And maybe you guys aren't aware, or maybe you're like, hey, mental health and wellness of first responders is Erin Jane's, that's her stuff. That's her shtick. That's her, area of passion. And I haven't actually heard her talk about it yet. That's because I have been waiting for this week to jump on and have a conversation with you guys about it. So it is not to preach. It is not to shame. It is not to anything. It's just to have a real conversation. And the reason that I waited for this week is because obviously each week on the Thin Line Rock Station, I host a show every Tuesday and Thursday. And this week on the Wednesday, which is September the 10th, it is Suicide Prevention Day, Worldwide Suicide Prevention Day. And so because both my shows this week bookend that very important day, I wanted to come on and talk about it a little bit. But I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to preach at you. I want to have a conversation with you as a former first responder, as the daughter of someone who lost a parent to suicide, and as someone who has worked on a suicide prevention hotline. So when I first moved to Boston about 10 years ago now, I worked at a suicide prevention and crisis counselling organisation. And I was the one on the other end of the phone line taking crisis phone calls. So I want to have a real conversation about the reality of this month, of tomorrow being World Suicide Prevention Day. I want to have a real conversation about it. I don't want to just, give platitudes, because if you are listening and you either currently are in a first responder role or have previously been, you guys know what I'm talking about. You know the reality of what, some people preach about and what others know what it's like to turn up on a scene like that, what it's like to deal with people in a highly emotional and, state of wanting to end their own life, and there are real conversations to be had in regards to that. And that's what we're going to have today. All right, guys, we're going to play a little bit of Evanescence with Going Under. Thank you, Orleans, there with Still the One, and you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And I want to congratulate you officially if you are still tuning in, because I realize I may have scared some of you with the intro to the show and the fact that I said we are going to discuss suicide this week. It's a topic that a lot of people find very uncomfortable to talk about, and whilst I do understand that, part of the reason about a lot of the work that I do and me wanting to talk about it is to take away some of that stigma, to take away some of the heaviness, to take away some of the fear associated with it, because it's that thing that everyone talks about in hushed little whispers, isn't it? But I have never, and look, I've mentioned it briefly on here before, but the word suicide has been part of my life since I was 2 years old, because that's how old I was when my dad took his own life. And I was 7 years old when that was explained to me. So the word suicide, the notion of suicide, has sort of been a part of my life for a very long time. I'm now 41 years old. And like I said, the top of the show, as a police officer, obviously, we dealt with people experiencing, suicidal ideation, people who had made attempts, people who unfortunately had completed, I've had to deliver the death notifications. There are lots of you listening who have done exactly the same things that I have. So I'm not sitting here, thinking I'm special by any means. But I guess I want to come on and talk about it a little bit too, simply because maybe to explain why I am really passionate about the mental health and wellness of first responders, because we lose more first responders to suicide each and every single year than we do in the line of duty. And if that's not a statistic you've heard before, let that sit with you for a minute. We all inherently do incredibly dangerous jobs, and we go to work not knowing sometimes whether we are actually going to come home. And yet a lot of people are choosing to leave of their own accord because they are in so much pain. And it is so prevalent amongst the first responder community that it is why I talk about it. I have these conversations with people in person. I have these conversations with people on the podcast. I will hold space for your darkness, because the reality is a lot of people who end up struggling, and whether that is a civilian or whether that is, someone in the first responder or emergency services realm, it's having those thoughts and feelings. It's very isolating, and people think that they're the only one, or they think that no one is going to understand. And so me jumping on here and having an open, honest conversation and using that word suicide, it's to make it so it's okay. It's to make it so we take away that shame and that guilt and that confusion and that fear, because it's a word that no one wants to deal with, but unfortunately we don't always have a choice in that matter. So that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about it. All right, guys, let's play a little bit of Just Like Paradise, David Lee Roth. My goodness, going back to the early 2000s there with a little bit of Lady Marmalade. G'day, guys. Welcome back to Holding Space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so this show and this week's shows, even though it's a heavy topic, I'm not coming on here to have like super heavy conversations. I guess my intention is to have real conversations about the real stuff that we deal with in a professional sense, and many of us have dealt with in a personal sense. I'm sure many of you listening have had experience with losing someone to suicide, and whether it's been a loved one, whether it's been a parent, whether it's been a partner, a sibling, a colleague, a good friend. I know we have a lot of not only first responder community, but we also have a lot of veterans tune in. And we know that, that statistic 22 a day, it's actually inaccurate now. And there's more. There's more than that every single day. So it touches a lot of people's lives. And it seems so pervasive and so insidious, but yet it's like the one thing that people still fear talking about. If this many people were, as in the first responder and veteran communities were, say, passing away from cancer, and we do know that, exposure and toxic exposures to, say, our firefighters and, the veterans with the burn pits and the, World Trade Center sites and all that kind of thing, like these are things that get talked about. And yet suicide is still always that taboo subject, that word that no one wants to talk about. And why is that? Because it's scary? Is it because it seems like no one's immune? And a lot of the time, the people we lose are the ones that we would suspect the least. I don't know. But coming on and having a conversation, like I'm talking to you, I don't know, about anything, about what you watched on Netflix last night, about how your footy team did on the weekend, about, I don't know, the freaking weather. We need to normalize having these conversations. We need to normalize saying these words and asking people flat out, if we have the suspicion that we don't think that they're okay, having that conversation and asking them in clear, concise language. So there's no misunderstandings. There's no, oh, I didn't realize they meant that by that when they said that. When you ask someone, hey, I just want to check in. Are you feeling suicidal right now? It's a pretty solid yes or no answer, isn't it? As I would, as you would learn in, counselling and psychology, it's what's called a closed question. There's nothing wrong with asking someone that question. And it can be because we're worried about them, that they're exhibiting signs and attitudes and behaviors that are concerning to us. Or it's because they have a lot going on in their life and they seemingly are acting like they don't. And maybe they're coping great, and that's awesome. But isn't it nice when someone checks in on you to make sure you actually are doing okay, as opposed to just assuming that you are? You know what I mean? All right, let's play a little bit of Dirt on My Boots, John Party. Thank you, Iron Maiden there with Run to the Hills, and you are back with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And I guess another reason why, I wanted to have this conversation with you guys today too is because I think the same as every something insert, awareness month, it's like a flash in the pan for a month or a day. Like I said, tomorrow is World Suicide Prevention Day. And, that could hold some significance for you. It may just be another day and you're like, yeah, whatever. I'm not trying to push my, ideology or anything onto anyone, but I think having these conversations, generalizing these conversations is important. So it doesn't just be this 1 month of awareness and then everyone forgets about it. These are conversations we should be having with the people that we love and our colleagues at work. We should be having them all the time. We should be checking in with people, whether you want to call it a buddy check, whether, mates checking on mates, like whatever nickname, ideation you want to give it. These are real conversations. This is what I'm having with you right here, right now. Real conversations with real people and checking in on them, because this is what we should be doing. This is how we help stop losing people in this way. Let's play some Imagine Dragons, Radioactive. There's one of my favorite Aussie artists there, Vance Joy with Riptide, and you're back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And look, it may, surprise you or maybe not. I've been sort of working on something, writing something. So if you want to follow me on the socials under Erin Jane Coaching, I'm probably going to post it or publish it tomorrow, whether it's a blog post on my website. I'll probably have a little bit on Instagram, maybe some on LinkedIn. My actual full name is Erin Nugent. Obviously, I just go by Erin Jane on the socials and stuff like that, but my actual proper name is Erin Nugent. So for anyone who wants to read it, I will probably post a link somewhere tomorrow and I can remind you about it on Thursday's show. But yeah, I think this is an important conversation to have and we should be having it. All right, guys, let's play a little bit of the Zombies with Time of the Season. Oh, I do like that one. Thank you, Benson Boone there with Beautiful Things. And you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And guys, we've kicked on into our second hour here together on a standard Tuesday afternoon date. And before we crack on again together, I do want to give a very special shout out to our members on night shift. I do know that our bosses here at the Thin Line Rock Station replay lots of our shows during those deep, dark hours of the early morning and late at night. And so, hey, If you happen to be cruising around in your police car or your ambulance or your fire truck and you are hearing my dulcet Aussie tones, I appreciate you. All right, guys, we are going to we're going to crack on with our conversation today. We are discussing the fact that it is Suicide Prevention Month, and tomorrow, Wednesday, is World Suicide Prevention Day, being September the 10th. And yeah, we're just going to keep having a bit of a conversation about that today, but we're just not glamorizing it. We're not glorifying it. We're not preaching. We're not doing any of those things. We're having real conversations about an important subject. And I also think maybe one of the reasons why it can be challenging for us, right? And look, I may be different. I don't know. But there are things that I used to deal with when I was a first responder that I put into a really tight little box. You know, whether we want to call it compartmentalization, anything like that. There are things that we could deal with in a work capacity, and our mind framed it like that. This is something I deal with in work. So, you know, potentially dealing with someone who was experiencing suicidal ideation, had maybe made an attempt or had completed, and you were there in the aftermath, you know, whether you were having to investigate their death, notify relatives, all of the different things. There are, I guess, aspects of that where that's our professional life. And sometimes I think it was really hard when aspects or parts that we could handle in our personal life blurred over into our private lives. And maybe that is where suicide sits. You know, for me, it was kind of always the opposite. Like I mentioned, you know, at the start of the show, you know, suicide has been a concept that I have known of and known about and felt the impact of for most of my life. So having that kind of then cross over into my you know, professional life, like it was very different, and it was something that I guess I always sort of not struggled with, but I guess felt the gravity of, because I sort of knew what it was like being on the other side, being, you know, one of the people left behind, you know, growing up in the aftermath of it. So when I did deal with it in a professional sense, I tried to, you know, obviously kind of keep that in mind. But I think, you know, then it can be really challenging when it's something that we may deal with incredibly well in a professional sense, but because there is that delineation, there is that sense of separation that, you know, we compartmentalize, you know, that's just all in a day's work, and we can offer them compassion or that kind of thing. But, you know, what happens when we're in our private life and our spouse turns around and tells us that they're feeling suicidal, or our teenage child, or our best mate? You know, it is incredibly confronting when something we deal with in one aspect of our lives bleeds into the other aspect, and all of the things we know how to do in a professional sense can sort of seemingly fly out the window in a personal sense, because then it's real. It feels really real when it's not just a stranger that we have all of the compassion and empathy for, but we don't know them, and we're not going to be necessarily affected by the outcome of their situation. But, you know, if it's our partner or our best mate or a colleague or our child saying, I'm in a lot of pain and I don't know if I want to be here anymore, that's something very different when it bleeds into our, you know, the different parts of our life like that. But, you know, that's why we're having these conversations today, guys, because they're real and important, and I'm here for it, and you guys know that I am. Thank you, Fleetwood Mac there with Little Lies, and you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, guys, and we are chatting because September is Suicide Prevention Month, all right? And many of us think, speaking of little lies, like, you know, how many of us have lied about how we've been feeling? if someone's asked us, and are we scared of burdening them? Are we scared of speaking the truth and speaking those words out loud and having it be real and admitting it not to someone else, but also to ourselves? I think that can be incredibly common too. And feeling like a burden is, I think, something that a lot of first responders struggle with, because we're the ones that people call for help, aren't we? We're the ones that turn up when, rock up on scene and it is a complete shit show. It is, the biggest cluster of God knows what is going on, and we know that. And so we look at that from a perspective of like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that to my colleagues or my loved ones. I don't want to burden them with all the crazy stuff that's bouncing around my head. But I think one of the important things to realize and recognize is that suicidal ideation is actually incredibly common for first responders because of the amount of occupational, trauma exposure that we see on a daily basis that is cumulative and consistent, and whatever other C words you want to use. We deal with it a lot, and it gets heavy. And sometimes that heaviness, we experience it like that, proverbial frog in the pot. And it just kind of keeps getting hotter and it creeps up on us. And then we can find ourselves in a hole, a big, deep, dark hole, and not knowing how we got there and not understanding how we got there. And then sometimes when we can't quantify it to ourselves, God, how do we explain this to someone else if I don't even know what's going on with me? But then, hey, I'm going to, ride around in the police car, and I'm, not going to call for backup, and I'm not going to wear my seatbelt, or I'm going to go, fight that fire, but I'm like, going to be a little careless and not going to wear my BA gear, or do my jacket up, or any of the, just really minor careless things, because maybe I don't actually kind of really want to go out of my way to die, but, I'm not sure I would care if I did. There's that too. It's passive suicidality. So this is the thing, and this is the pervasive aspect of, the concept of, suicide and mental health and all of the things. There's not just one little solution and everyone's okay. There's not just one little sign and symptom that we can catch before it's too late. There's not just one thing that can cause it for us that then either we can avoid or make better. And that's part of the challenging nature of it, that everyone's experience is so vastly different and subjective, and our window of tolerance is just so completely different, so that's why I want to have these conversations and make them normal. Make this kind of thing normal, having real conversations with people about how they are feeling and how they are coping. Make it normal, because this doesn't end unless we make it end. That's pretty much where we land on it. Thank you, Van Halen, there with Hot for Teacher, and you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so, like I've been saying, I want to have these real conversations about real things that affect our population, being your first responders, emergency services members, all that kind of thing. And you guys do know I do try to come on here and share some of my like personal experiences and stuff with you, because I think it helps. I think it helps us connect. I think it helps maybe you guys to know me a little, not a little better, but even just a little bit, so that you know that I'm not coming on here and just trying to give, lip service or whatever else. And I know sometimes I talk about heavy topics, but it's because I care, And like I said at the top of the show in the last hour, like suicide is something that has permeated, my whole life, from, childhood loss, working as a police officer, and all the different variations that suicide has in, a first responder role. And for my particular one, it was law enforcement. So, we would go and talk to people who were struggling, with ideation. We would, race to people who either were actively attempting, or, we'd been reported that they'd attempted, unfortunately attended in the aftermath a lot, had to, notify the loved ones that their loved one had passed away by suicide. There's lots of different involvements in that kind of role. And then, like I said, when I first moved here to Boston, I worked at a suicide prevention and crisis counselling organisation as a crisis counsellor. So taking phone calls every single day from people who were struggling. And so that's why this language, these conversations, they don't scare me. They don't, I guess it's why I know how important they are, because the first question that I would ask someone when when I answered that phone, "Hi, my name's Erin. Are you feeling suicidal today?" And when you ask someone in plain language, it's the same way we deliver death notifications. You need to use plain language. It helps. And sometimes it's too scary for someone to actually say that word. So if you say it for them, maybe you are helping. And at the very least, you know that you've asked the question. And if something happens after that moment, or after that time, weeks, months, whenever later, you ask the question. I think there's weight in that. And there's care, and there's concern, and there's consideration, which I think we all want to offer people, and we all want offered to us. So it's really just another aspect of caring for ourselves, caring for our loved ones, wanting people to be okay. Part of that is having these conversations. If you are having the suspicion that you think someone is struggling, having open, honest, forthright conversations counts. All right, guys, let's play a little bit of Aha with Take On Me. Thank you, Blondie, there with Call Me. And you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And look, if you are listening to this and some of the things I'm talking about are resonating and not in the way that you wish that they were, not like hey, I really should check in on so-and-so. I have been a little bit worried about them, but more in the, oh shit, like she literally just hit the nail on the head of so many of the things that I've been thinking and feeling and experiencing lately. Number one, don't freak out. Okay. I'm talking about it because I care, and because I'm here to tell you, as someone who has been left behind, that people want you around. They very, very much do. And it's important not to trust everything we think if we are struggling with these kinds of thoughts. no one's going to miss me, no one's going to care, they're going to be better off without us. They're not accurate assumptions. I'm here to tell you. Okay, so if you are having these kinds of thoughts, I want you to reach out to someone that you trust. And if that seems like too much, just go somewhere so you're safe. Safety is my number one priority for you right now. So go somewhere safe and go and be safe somewhere. And do reach out to someone if you can. If you can take a minute. I know it seems really scary, but the scarier thing is you not being around tomorrow. That's scarier. And it doesn't matter what you've done. Nothing can't be forgiven. People come back from the deepest, darkest places. I've spoken with them numerous times, and it's not impossible. For wherever you find yourself, whatever has happened, you can come back from it. So get to safety, reach out to someone, and I will, if you can't face talking to someone that you know, sometimes talking to a stranger can be easier. And I understand that because I was on the other end of the phone a lot of the time when people were reaching out. So the number is 988 for anyone in the United States. You can text it, you can do the phone call. There are specific first responder and veteran crisis lines. I will post some contact numbers in my stories on social media. Alternatively, if you aren't on social media, pretty much everyone's got an email these days. You can email me at info@erinjanecoaching.com or reach out to the Thin Line Rock Station. And everyone who has a show or is part of this radio station wants to support you in any way that we can. And so if that's helping find you resources, we are more than happy to do that. So if not through me, through someone else, we want you to be here tomorrow. So I really hope that you are. That was a little bit of journey there with any way you want it. And guys, you have just spent the last couple of hours hanging out with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, where we have been holding space this week for Suicide Prevention Month and World Suicide Prevention Day. That is happening tomorrow, September 10th. So look, I know it probably seems like it's been a heavy show, but I don't want it to be. I want these conversations to happen because this is real. This is reality. We deal with suicide in a professional capacity a lot of the time, and unfortunately sometimes we deal with it in a private capacity too. So these conversations need to be real. We need to get real comfortable having them and do them often enough so that you do get comfortable and it doesn't feel awkward and it doesn't feel taboo. Because we need to fight through the bullshit cultural stigma that says discussing mental health shouldn't happen. Okay? I am intentionally leaving you with a very boppy song because I know it has been a little heavy today. All right, guys? I want you to stay safe. I want you to tune back in on Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are going to carry on an important conversation. But stay safe out there. And in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some Icona Pop, and I love it. Cheers, guys. That was a little bit of Wiz Khalifa there with See You Again. And guys, you are here holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station on our standard Thursday afternoon date. G'day, guys. I want to kick off the show today just by acknowledging the date. The date of what it is September 11th. And I think as much as it's a day that is obviously very significant and poignant for Americans, it It's a date that is also incredibly significant for, I think, people all over the world. I'm Australian, and it's one of those where were you days. I was 17 years old, and in Australia it was nighttime, and I know I watched it play out in real time on the news. I watched the second plane hit. I watched the towers fall. I watched all of those horrible images play out live. And I think a lot of us did. I think many of us listening may have, either been working that day, may have lost people that we know and loved, may have signed up whether to become a first responder, as I know some did, or signed up and served their country in the military. So I just wanted to acknowledge the people that, as a collective, that we lost that day, that we lost civilians as a result of a terrorist attack. We lost a lot of first responders on that day, and we have equally lost a lot in the aftermath. Whether it's from, people having significant, medical conditions afterwards as a result of, working at Ground Zero, people that we lost in the war on terror, serving their country. A lot of loss resulted from one day. And I just want to acknowledge it. I want to acknowledge the fact that today can be a really heavy day for a lot of people. It's a heavy month, being suicide prevention month, and it's, yesterday, like I talked about on Tuesday, was a heavy day because it was World Suicide Prevention Day. So there's been a lot of heaviness, and I want to acknowledge that because some significant days are harder than others and feel heavier than others, and this can be one of them. So if that is you today and you are really feeling it, take a moment for yourself and just do something that is good for you, whether that's go for a drink, whether it's sit and meditate, whether it's, go for a run, whether it's take a moment to remember someone that you've lost. Just do something that is good for you. Go hug your kids, go hug your partner, wife, spouse, whoever. Spend some time with your friends. Do whatever it is that is going to bring just a moment of whatever it is that you need today. All right, let's play a little bit of Kiss. Thank you, Jackson Dean, there with Don't Come Looking, and you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so, like I mentioned on Tuesday, we are carrying on the conversation about Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month, and obviously after yesterday, World Suicide Prevention Day. And I guess I also just want to say thank you to some of the listeners out there, because I had a few people sort of reach out after Tuesday's show, and just sort of let me know that some of the stuff that I talked about resonated, and I think, I mention it often that, we do love hearing from you guys, the listeners. And I think in particular, when we talk about important subjects and topics, and I guess to maybe know that, it did kind of hit the mark with some of you. So I do want to say a very special thank you to those people who sort of reached out and shared some of their experiences with me. I do hold that as a very privileged position that you guys do reach out, that that you can. I love the fact that people feel comfortable reaching out and having a bit of a dialogue and sharing their experiences. So yeah, thank you to those who did take the time to reach out and let me know that some of the stuff that I said on Tuesday did was impactful in one way or another. So what I wanted to continue the conversation on with today is I guess we sort of talked on Tuesday kind of more about like people struggling and you know, some of the people that we've lost and all that kind of thing. So today I kind of want to focus a little bit more about being the person on the other end. Like I want to talk about like when you are that person that either perhaps asks that question, like, you know, like we sort of are encouraging people to do. You do your buddy checks, check in on your mates for mates, whatever you want to call it. If you're noticing some troubling behavior or you're a bit concerned about someone, asking that question. But, you know, when I say we, you know, I guess people in the mental health and wellness space in the way that I am and many of us are, you know, we're always encouraging people to ask those questions and have those conversations. But, you know, what happens when someone does turn around and actually says to you, yeah, I'm struggling and I'm having, you know, suicidal ideation and all that kind of thing. Like when you ask the question and someone answers you truthfully and honestly and from a really vulnerable place, like what happens then? Because sometimes that's really, really overwhelming. It can be incredibly overwhelming and daunting when someone is really open and honest with you. So that's the kind of conversation I want to have with you guys today. How do we handle that? What do we do? Because when it's in a personal capacity as opposed to a professional one, it can be really confronting because, you know, we often know what to do in a you know, professional capacity. We transport them to hospital. We, you know, arrest them under some kind of mental health act to get them assessed, all of the things. But when that's your partner or your spouse or maybe your child or your friend or your colleague who is expressing that they are struggling, what do we do? So that's what we're going to have a bit of a chat about today. All right, guys, we're going to play a little bit of Van Halen, Running with the Devil. Thank you, The Fray there with How to Save a Life. And you're back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so similar to what I talked about on Tuesday, right? Like the notion that a conversation about the topic and context of suicide, I'm not doing it to, you know, drag you down or allow a big cloud of heaviness to come over our conversation here today. It's to have real conversations. It is to encourage open, realistic, raw dialogue. That's why I'm on here talking about it, you know. So it's not to be a complete downer on your Thursday afternoon. But so one of the main sort of things I wanted to talk about. So like I said, I want to talk about it from the other perspective of the person if someone does disclose to you that they are struggling. I think one of the most important things to be aware of is the fact that ideation doesn't always have to equal intent, right? And so ideation is obviously having suicidal thoughts, you know, and someone can admit to feeling suicidal or saying that they don't want to be here anymore and all that kind of thing. But there's a big gap from that to actually taking action and having intent, because sometimes people express the amount of psychological pain they're in by explaining it in that way, like in saying that, you know, I'm feeling suicidal, or I don't know if I want to be here anymore. Like sometimes it's simply the fact that they're in so much pain they don't know how else to define it except of, you know, using that or quantifying it by saying, hey, I'm in so much pain that I don't want to be here anymore. But that's not to say that they actually have, you know, the intent to take their life. And so I think that is a very important clarification sometimes. So it just means listening and asking the questions if someone does disclose to you that they are feeling in that way. And it's even, you know, like almost like a bit of like a not necessarily like a safety plan, but it's like performing like a risk assessment. So if someone is, you know, expressing that to you, well then listen. ask the question. Say, okay, like what do you mean by that? Talk to me. How have you been feeling? How long have you been feeling this way? So I'll play a song, and then we'll sort of go through maybe some of the parameters that you can ask about to really get an idea of where that person's sitting, whether it is just thoughts and feelings, or they are at the opposite end of the spectrum and really have severe intent, because obviously that is where the danger zone exists, doesn't it? All right, guys, we're going to play one of my favorites, a little bit of Pearl Jam with Alive. That was Passenger there with Let Her Go, and you were back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so, like I was saying, there is a vast difference between someone having ideation and someone having intent. So it sort of, I guess, like exists on a bit of a continuum. So you can have thoughts and feelings and maybe even sort of like slight desires, right? But there's a vast gap between that and then actually having the intent. And so a very sort of easy to do and easy to remember, like sort of risk assessment is sort of just got 4 components. And it's whether someone has the ideation, whether they have thought about the means, which means have they thought about the way in which they want to potentially take their life. Sometimes you're going to figure out pretty quickly where someone is on that continuum and on that spectrum, as to whether they've actually thought about that or not. Sometimes they're just talking about they're in so much pain they don't want to be here anymore, but they actually haven't considered that. And that's not to say asking the question is going to put it in their mind. It's really just performing that risk assessment in the moment. If they do know the method that they are, planning to use, whether they have access to it and whether they know the time frame. So whether they're like, yep, on this date, or, after I finish this or whatever else. So really, if anyone's kind of in that 24, 48 hour time frame, that's where we're really at a significant risk, and we probably need to get that person seen to by a clinician or taken to hospital or some help sooner rather than later. And we don't leave those people alone. Okay? So that's just a really, really quick risk assessment that I wanted to share, because I think sometimes if someone's coming at us and they're being really vulnerable and explaining to us how they've been feeling and what they've been struggling with, if we can kind of, have a really open and honest conversation with them about it, but ask some pretty important and poignant questions along the way, we're going to get a better idea of where they're at on that continuum, and as whether it is just some ideation, which is challenging, but there's a big difference between ideation and intent. And so knowing that is going to help you identify how to help that person a little bit better. All right, let's play some Redbone. Oh, you may think you are in the danger zone here, holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, because we are continuing our conversation about suicide prevention this week. And so coming up in the next hour, what I want to discuss with you is sort of some things that can be helpful if someone does open up to you, if you ask them that question or they just kind of blurted out that they are struggling. I want to share some things that can be helpful, and equally I want to share some things that are incredibly unhelpful to someone struggling with suicidal ideation or intent. So that's what we're going to have a chat about in the next hour. But in the meantime, we're going to play a little bit of Soft Cell with Tainted Love. Oh, that is a bit of a fun one to kick off our second hour here together, holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And look, if you have tuned into both shows this week, I do want to just express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude, because I do know that, seemingly discussing suicide for like 4 hours a week, it does sound like a lot. And I'm sure this isn't the only space where you are perhaps getting inundated with it. So I'm trying to provide, just real, authentic conversations about an important subject that I think affects a lot of us in the first responder and emergency services realm. And that to me is what it's about, and I like to come on here and provide some, wellness tips or some psychoeducation and all that kind of thing. And that really is the point of it. So thank you to those who are tuning in. Big shout out to my bosses who give me a lot of leeway in all of the weird and wonderful things that I choose to talk about. So this hour I wanted to share a little bit about like some of the things that can be helpful and some of the things that can be maybe not so helpful, right? And so I will sort of post some of these things on social media. So if you sort of jump in the car or jump in the truck or jump in the ambulance or whatever after a call and you have maybe missed like some of it and it is of interest to you, go check out my socials on Erin Jane Coaching, either on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. And I will post sort of like some more of the content of what I've shared today, because I do know that you guys are working incredibly hard and you don't always sort of like, capture everything that we are here to talk about. So, I do want to share like a bit of like a quick list of some of the things that it's not when I talk about, right, people being unhelpful, I think we all know that it's not intentional, right? But someone like me who, and maybe even some of the people listening, like I've gone through suicide prevention and crisis counseling training. I'm studying psychology and counseling. I've, gone through to get my life and wellness coaching qualification. So in those kind of moments, I know how to sit with people in silence. I know how to carry the weight of heavy emotions, heavy feelings, heavy topics and subject matter. I wrote an article about it this week that, if you have any interest, you can find either on my Facebook page or on my website, erinjanecoaching.com, that talked about some of my experience with suicide, both in a personal sense and a professional sense. I know how to sit with people in those sorts of situations, but not everyone does. And it's not to say, and I don't think I'm special in any way for it, but it is really challenging and really uncomfortable sometimes to sit with someone in that space. And so when I say sometimes, things that we do that are unhelpful, it can sometimes just be like our initial reaction that's out of shock or out of fear or out of stress or all of the things. But I guess I feel like if I share them with you here today, it might just go back, you might just sort of be tuning in, or it might go through to the keeper through a little bit of osmosis, or just have something in the back of your mind, just in case someone does open up to you and you go, oh, I know I just might need to sit with this and not react in this way or this way or this way. So I'm going to play a little bit of Fatboy Slim and then we will discuss it a little bit more. That was the Allman Brothers Band with Midnight Rider, and you were back with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. So I'm gonna just smash on into it, right? So like I was saying at the top of the show or the top of this hour, I want to talk about some of the worst things you can do, or just I would say some of like the most unhelpful things, right? And I've just got a list of sort of like 4 or 5 of them, so we're just going to smash into them. So if someone is coming to you or you've asked the question and they're expressing maybe the suicidal ideation, thoughts, behaviors, intent, all of that kind of thing, some of the most unhelpful things that you can do, and this comes from having conversations with people in this space, right? Be dismissive. If someone is vulnerable enough to open up to you and express how awful they're feeling and how much they are struggling, if you're dismissive and you do a bit of like, don't be ridiculous, like that is just like getting smacked in the face by a sledgehammer, or like, scrambling and running into a brick wall. Like that is probably not the most helpful thing in the moment. So that's probably like one of my top ones that like maybe instead of being dismissive, maybe say nothing, or just let that person talk. I just think that no one likes to be invalidated, no matter what they're going through, right? And yeah, that's probably like my top one. And the next one on the list is to either deflect or sort of minimize either what they're experiencing, what they're going through, what they're being open and honest and telling you about. So instead of, being like, what you're going through really isn't that bad, or I've had it, I've had it so much worse than you, or so-and-so's life is like worse than yours, suck it up, all that kind of thing. Like deflecting or minimizing what they're telling you is their reality. That's equally something that can be incredibly hurtful. It can make someone shut down. And is not really gonna help them in that moment that they are being really open and honest and raw and vulnerable with you. Shaming or blaming them. Again, one of the top ones that is incredibly unhelpful. If someone's kind of saying to you that they're struggling with something and this is kind of what's causing their suicidal ideation, doing the whole, aren't you over that by now? You really want to kill yourself over that? Or, doing like the whole, that's just selfish, or, it's the coward's way out, that classic trope that I'm sure all of us have heard before. Like assigning shame and blame to someone when they already are struggling is, again, incredibly unhelpful and not what someone really needs to be hearing in that moment. And I would also probably almost like equally, that goes along with shame and blame is judgment, judging someone for feeling that way, because again, that is assigning shame. So, like the whole, like, what's wrong with you? How can you think or act like this? You're effed in the head. I can't believe, you would think that way, all that kind of thing. It's again, incredibly unhelpful. And I think one of the other things too, which I think this is one of the ones that happens, which is incredibly common, but equally unhelpful in that moment. You are allowed to have feelings if this is someone that you love and someone you deeply care about is expressing this. Like it is very common and obviously understandable to have your own thoughts and feelings and emotions about the fact that someone you love is telling you that they maybe don't want to be here anymore. And I very much understand that, and that is not to diminish it. But in the moment that person is telling you this, that's not the moment for your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions. It's just not. So one of the last ones that I would say is making their suicidality about you. That is equally one of the most unhelpful things that you can do, because it's, like I said, it's just not the time and it's not the place, and it's just inappropriate. Making that moment that they're choosing to be open with you and raw and vulnerable, and then making it about you, being the whole like, how could you do this to me? Not helpful. And that can, again, lead to more shame. So they're just kind of, I think I'm going to do like 4 or 5. My top 5 things, which again, all of them sometimes understandable because it might just be that natural kind of reaction in the moment. But I just implore you, really just sit with them. Just let that person talk. That's like probably one of the key things you can do. And yeah, if like I said, I will pop this list of things of like perhaps what not to do up on the social media pages so that you will have them should you need them. All right, guys, let's play a little bit of Boston and rock and roll band. Thank you, the Hollies there with Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, and you are back with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station, where we are holding space for suicide prevention this week. And I guess one thing I also very much did want to address, and many of you may already know this in your first responder and emergency services roles, right? Most of us go through some kind of mental health training, but it's also, I think, really important because there's been like not like an urban legend, but like a notion that if you say the word suicide, you're going to put it in someone's head. and that is just so incredibly inaccurate. Just saying it is not going to put it in their head. Like, it just won't. It's either the ideation or, whether it's passive, whether there is intent, whether it's just thoughts or feelings, whatever else. It's kind of either there or it's not. And nothing you say is going to change or influence that. You can say the word. Use plain language. That's part of why we're having this conversation and this dialogue today, is using really clear language. Are you suicidal right now? Are you feeling suicidal? Asking clear, concise questions. You don't need to be scared that you are going to put it in their head. And from so many of the conversations I've had over many, many, many years in doing some of this work, like actually having someone ask them that question and using that language, sometimes it can be a big relief to the person who you're talking to, because equally it's a really heavy, hard word for someone to admit to sometimes. So sometimes you're actually giving them a little bit of grace just to be able to answer yes or no equally. They might just turn around and be like, no, I wouldn't do anything like that. I'm just having a bit of a tough time, blah, blah, blah. But no, like, I'm okay. Thank you for asking. But I guess, I just wanted to address that in the fact that I think that is where a lot of people get concerned. Oh my God, if I say it, I'm gonna make them do it, or I'm gonna plant that seed in their head. No, you're not. It is entirely inaccurate. So it's not something you have to be worried about. So ask the question. Do your buddy checks. Talk to people when you are noticing that their behavior is off. Like I mentioned last hour, like very, very easy risk assessment. And just because someone says they are struggling doesn't mean that there is that intent. But have the conversation anyway. It's as simple as that. Let's play some of my people in excess with Need You Tonight. Thank you, Kid Rock, there with Cowboy, and you are back holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station. And so I guess I wanted to turn to talking about some of the things that are helpful. And to be honest, if someone is opening up to you, you actually really don't have to do a lot. If you don't know what to say, you don't actually have to say anything. Sometimes your presence, sometimes simply being the person to ask the question is enough. Sometimes just your quiet, sitting there in silence with someone, giving them a hug, like a gentle squeeze of their hand or on their knee or shoulder, or if like a hug, that kind of affection isn't really your deal. Just sitting in silence with them, but your presence of being there, sometimes that's enough. Sometimes they're not actually looking for you to say anything. Sometimes they just need to get it off their chest and admit it to someone, and that is going to be enough of an outlet that is going to help them feel better. Or you know what? You can say the truth. You can say, I don't know what to say. When is there anything ever wrong with speaking the truth? Like, sometimes one of the most powerful things you can do is just hold space for them, for their thoughts and their feelings and whatever it is that they're going through. And equally, I'm not saying like that might feel really, it may feel really scary to sit there and listen to someone you love or you respect or admire, or is a really important person in your life. Like, it can feel scary to sit there and listen to them talk about that, but it will also inform you, like we talked about earlier, in terms of whether it is just ideation and thoughts and feelings, or whether there is intent. Because like we've said, someone can feel suicidal but not have any intent on actually taking their life. they're just expressing how much pain they're in. And I think also another really powerful response, and I think this is kind of one of the best ones for someone who is just, doesn't feel like they're qualified to, or they're scared of like saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or whatever else. If it makes you uncomfortable to sit there in silence or admit that you don't know what to say in response, right? A really powerful thing is acknowledgement paired with validation. So it could be just as simple as, wow, it sounds like you're in a lot of pain right now. Or, gosh, you sure are up against it right now. Or, I don't know, like, my friend, you found yourself in a really dark place. That must be really challenging or painful or upsetting, exhausting. There's a lot of different words that could be used. This isn't saying that you are sitting there in agreement with their, perhaps distorted beliefs or intentions. If they feel like they don't belong anymore, or they're not worth it, or anything like that. Like, validating and acknowledging how they're feeling isn't agreement. It's acknowledging their pain and their turmoil. It's validating the weight of what they've been carrying for perhaps like a really, really long time. It may even be acknowledging, their pain and the fact that they've fought some of these thoughts and intentions for an extended period of time. And just to kind of like sit and think about that for a minute, like if someone might actually be fighting their own mind to survive. So part of that acknowledgement and validation may even just be thanking them for fighting so hard to stay and acknowledging how exhausting that may have been for them. So I just think you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know what exactly the right thing is to say. There is a lot of power in just your presence and sitting in silence and just holding space for them. And there is a lot of power in just acknowledging and validating what they're going through. And like I said, that isn't agreement. That isn't saying, yes, you're exactly right to be feeling this way. It's just like, geez, mate, that sounds really rough. I'm really sorry you've been going through that. I'm really, really glad you told me. It can just be as simple as that. Oof, you guys do know that is a favorite of mine. Thank you, Hunger Strike, Temple of the Dog. And guys, that is going to do it for here, holding space with Erin Jane on the Thin Line Rock Station for our standard Thursday afternoon date. And you know what? I want to say thank you to you guys for holding space for the conversation that we have had this week. It has meant a lot to me to be able to share some of my experiences, good, bad, and indifferent, when it comes to suicide prevention. Trying to just have these real conversations, because I do think that it is important. So thank you for allowing me the space and holding that space for me to be able to do it. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with my favorite Creedence Clearwater Revival song, Fortunate Son. But in the meantime, I want you guys to stay safe out there. Thank you as always. It is a pleasure and an absolute privilege to get to spend this time with you. And I'm really grateful. Like I mentioned, always feel free to reach out on the socials under Erin Jane Coaching. If you missed anything from today, if something resonated, if you're kind of like, oh, can you explain this a little bit more? Or, hey, can you talk about this next week? I love hearing from you. All right. So you guys stay safe out there, and I will catch you next week. Cheers, guys.
Hi, guys. It's Erin Jane here. Firstly, thank you for listening to I Will Hold Space for Your Darkness. This podcast really is for you, the listener. And I hope you're finding as much value in listening to these conversations as I am in having them. If you'd like to offer any feedback, suggest a subject matter, are interested in being a podcast guest, or would like to get in contact to receive first responder life and wellness coaching services, please reach out. You can find me on Instagram at Erin Jane Coaching or the dedicated podcast account, Erin Jane _Darkness Podcast, or my website, www.erinjanecoaching.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'm so grateful to have you as part of this darkness community. Cheers.